Black Myth: Wukong is the modern action RPG we've all been waiting for. It checks all the right boxes: fast-paced combat, visually stunning environments, and boss fights that demand your full attention. And after clocking around 13 hours or so with the game, it's clear that Game Science has created something with tons of passion that has the potential to be in the Game of the Year discussion. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to ignore the outside controversies and just talk about why stepping into the world of Black Myth: Wukong has been nothing short of a mind-blowing experience. The game's based on one of the great classical Chinese novels, Journey to the West, which I've not read personally, but the lore has been so cool to a point where I've been watching other videos and other films to understand the story better. First of all, this is definitely not a Souls-like. That much has already been confirmed by the devs, who said this game is an action RPG weeks before its release, and after playing it for some time, I definitely see what they mean. This is a game where you fight tons of bosses, dodge a lot while budgeting your stamina, rest at bonfire-esque checkpoints to refill your healing flask, and level up your character. But is that all that defines a Souls-like? I would say no. And if the reason you haven't picked up the game is because you don't want to play a Souls-like, then have no fear, because this game isn't that. It's an ARPG, and based on my experience so far, this feels more like the modern God of War games and less like Dark Souls. It feels great to play, looks really good in motion, and might be the best action RPG I've experienced since Lies of P. The opening 10 minutes of this game is a statement that Game Science really wanted to make a splash. I mean, the scale, the seamless transition from combat to cutscenes, dynamic camera work absolutely sets the tone, and it's one of the most wowed I've been by the start of an action game since God of War 3, and that's saying a lot. The first thing that struck me when I started playing the game was how fast it responds to evasion. Now, in action games in general, there's a price to be paid for the attack, such as being caught in the gap between motion or not being able to evade at the timing you expect, but the invincibility time for evasion here seems really friendly, so it really welcomes new players who are looking to get into the game. And unlike many other games, this game strikes a balance that makes it more accessible to a wider audience. You don't lose all your progress or sparks when you die, but instead get resurrected at your last shrine to try the level again, where you can craft spells, upgrade armor, and so on. Now, it's a great system that doesn't rely on heavily punishing the player. Also, since there's no concept of falling to your death, you can try to explore with more freedom, but you do have that invisible wall, which does get a little frustrating sometimes. Now, while this game isn't a Souls-like, the combat is very clearly based on a Neo-inspired combat system. You have a stamina bar, your movement is very fast-paced, you also have magic focus and special moves to help you. At its core though, it feels like a Souls-like when it comes to combat, meaning that if you've played a lot of these games, then you'll easily excel at this combat system. As for general melee combat, the game only lets you wield one type of weapon, a staff with 3 battle stances, but there's enough variety here that does not make the combat feel repetitive. And the game gives you complete freedom to respec your skills at any time by visiting a shrine, so you can create different builds and really figure out what works for you without having to worry about not being able to try out a skill. Now, there are many side quests and secrets in this game that you absolutely should not miss. For example, I rang 3 bells in the first chapter, which caused me to get teleported to a hidden temple and trigger a boss fight. In chapter 2, I collected eyes from Buddha statues, which ended up making 2 rock giants fight against each other, which was awesome. And then there's that Drunken Boar quest, which I have to say has the coolest boss fight and cinematics, but it's not just about finding these secrets for the bosses. I mean, the end reward actually helps you to get a key item, which makes your main boss fight much easier. So exploration is an absolute key in the game, and I love how it's been incorporated into the world. But I just wish that the game gave more clues so these kind of secrets are not missed by players, because they definitely add a lot to the overall experience. So these are my early reviews of Black Myth: Wukong. I'm having a ton of fun with this game, and it's absolutely living up to the hype. It's easier than I expected, at least in the early chapters, but that's really not a bad thing in my book. I don't really enjoy getting stuck in games, I enjoy beating them. So I highly recommend picking this one up, and since it has already sold over 10 million copies, I'm sure a lot of people will agree with that opinion. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and until next time, happy gaming!